Hey Amar, how are you?
Good, good. Good to see you, Archit.
Likewise, it's been a minute.
Yes, for sure. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, thank you. So Amar, like we were talking about the last time, wanted to sort of get on this journey of trying to understand more about signal from noise as it relates to the
Mm,
AECO space, especially in the age of AI and manufacturing as well,
mhm,
given you've sort of rounded the
mm,
bases there. So wanted to make this more of a conversation, trying to understand sort of how you think about, building products in this space, how you think about serving customers, and any
mhm.
perspectives you have on the space overall. Sound good?
Yeah, for sure. Let's go for it.
Super. So, Amar, you've had a storied career, right? You've been co-CEO and chief product officer at Autodesk. You're on the board of PTC. You've been on the board of Aspen, and now you're the
Mhm,
CEO of Motif. So,
mhm.
help us understand sort of broad shifts. What are a couple of key things that have shifted in the industry over the last few years?
Actually, Archit, I'm struck by at a macro level, not much has shifted. So, I mean, the industry in some ways has is still struggling with what it did, 25, 30 years ago, which is waste on projects and deadlines being missed and all those kinds of things. Like the overall challenge of the building industries are they're doing very complex structures with coordinated across multiple companies, and just making that endeavor work is very hard. I really do admire the people who are trying to do so. All these things we talk about, waste and productivity, makes people sound like they're not doing their job. They're really working hard. It's just a very big challenge. I think the thing over the last 25 years that has changed is the adoption of digital technology. Like I would say in construction, mobile has been a very big force. So that, the job site was never connected in some ways. Now it is, especially with mobile. So the adoption of technology, building information modeling, mobile technology, a little bit more now cameras on job sites and sensors, like these things are showing up a lot more. And I think a little bit of the other thing that I've watched is people trying to take on this industrialized construction where, they're trying to make buildings like the way people make ships, which is you do it in modules off-site and try and assemble it on-site because it just actually helps with a lot of the coordination challenges. Like those are, so people have been trying to adopt new approaches. The other thing I've noticed, of course, is that climate change has become a bigger factor in the design of things. So people are paying a lot more importance to energy considerations, carbon considerations, and all the work that they do. And all of that brings us to, again, a technology sort of solution to those things, which is the combination of cloud and machine learning, sort of holds promise to kind of both connect the people involved in this endeavor. Like they always that think of how do you keep everybody on the same page, and then also better decision making because you have more sources you can include. And with artificial intelligence now, you can make faster estimates on things that, rather than having huge specialists do work for you, you can sort of take quick decisions on 80% information and stuff like that. So it's an exciting time. Macro hasn't changed, but a lot of the underlying infrastructure is changing very rapidly.
Super. Let's piece that apart. So one thing you mentioned was about adoption, and I think again, my sense is again, it's easy to be critical of the industry because
Yeah,
there's so many different players and
yeah,
sort of conflicting sort of demands, if you will. But broadly, I tend to agree with you, right? Because this adoption has gone up over the course of the last couple of decades, and I think
yeah,
we've probably gone from an era where there was very little data on job sites to a lot more data on job sites.
yes,
But then the usability of it, there's some question marks around it. But the good news there again is hopefully it's actually feeds into more models that can utilize
yes,
the information that's available.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. No, I definitely think that people are better informed, more connected on job sites. They're definitely trying to do the right thing. The complexity of projects continues to rise, I think, is the other challenge is that people are doing, if you look at the skyscrapers being built or, these huge airports and towers or multi-use kind of things, like these projects have gotten more challenging. So I think you have these two forces. But I do think digital technology is also, in some ways, it's no longer like a novelty in these places. People like watch them, they actually really use this stuff. And even robotic construction now that is showing up on job sites, like it's a real thing. I think overall, look, the one consideration of technology in this industry that is a little unique compared to, like, you and I read about Lovable went from 0 to 500 million in 2 days or some nonsense like that, is that people are dealing with physical things. Safety is a very big deal, so they have to be thoughtful. Risk is a big deal, and people also tend to adopt technology based on project cycles, right? So they building takes 2 years to complete. So once you start with a tool set, you're not going to change it in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Or, roads or airports take 7, 10 years to construct. Like the cycle of adoption in this industry kind of reflects that dynamic. They really need to de-risk things and they really need to do it on a project cycle, which makes their adoption look a little bit more slow. But I think they're really just trying to be thoughtful.
And great point there, because I think it's easy to say, hey, why don't you do it across the portfolio? There's the piece around how P&Ls are structured in this world at a project level, but there's also the piece about, sort of, to your point, the long cycles around 4 or 5 years for a project. You can't keep testing every Friday one new
Yes,
thing, right? So I think there's a bit of
exactly.
that challenge that affects the adoption cycles. The other thing that you mentioned was around sort of increase in adoption, which kind of seemed to sort of, there's an underlying element there of people are seeing the value more clearly as opposed to, let's say, a
Mhm.
couple of decades ago. Do you see that? Do you see
Mhm.
that's the case?
Yeah, I definitely see that. There's a lot more conversations are this. I mean, if you look at the way the organizations have evolved in these companies, like there's a lot more. It's not just the CIO. There's a digital technology person. They're making, I watch even with machine learning now. There's a lot of construction companies leaning into it. So yeah, there's a lot more openness and adoption, but I think the bar is just a little higher in this industry for everything to work. So.
Interesting. So somewhere in there, was there a
Yeah.
genesis of founding Motif?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think I mean, technology is fun. Like it's a lot sort of like what you can go do. So, I'm always interested in places we can apply innovation. And the idea behind Motif was really once sitting there and you're talking about technology adoption and all the challenges people have. And so, my co-founder and I spent a year trying to think of like what problems have not been solved. Like what are things that the people are still finding
Mm.
painful? And we were struck by the fact that while the design of buildings, the upfront part where architects and engineering firms come up with what needs to be built, there was a stack that existed, the building information modeling stack that existed, has existed now for 25 years. It has not been modernized. So every other stack that we see in every other vertical industry, including I don't know about process and power. I'll stay away from that one. But I look at mechanical engineering, I look at financial, I look at health services, I look at software development. Like all these industries have really leverage technology to sort of reimagine the front end of the process, right? And the building industry stuck with things from 25 years ago. And in that time frame, based on the things you and I were just talking about, the complexity of buildings rising, climate change becoming a bigger deal, still the challenge of coordinating people. Like the 25-year-old stack is not just old, it's actually problematic. Like and that's kind of what led us to think about this is okay, all these things are becoming more painful for people, more complex projects, managing more people, and we were exploring, is there a better way to do this? And after about 6 to 9 months of thinking through it, it really struck us like, hey, we could build something not incrementally better, but dramatically better to go solve this problem. And that was the genesis of Motif.
Great, which leads me to the questions. What exactly are you folks building at Motif?
I mean, our customers would call it a new building information modeling system. They would compare it to, what everybody understands as Revit. We kind of talk about the fact that, Revit to us is like comparing Google to ChatGPT. Like, yes, ultimately you're searching for a answer to a question in both those things, but the way you interact with it is quite dramatically different. So we are trying to build a new system for building design. It'll some parts of it will look very familiar, like the 3D modeling environment, drawing generation, view generation, all those kinds of things that feels like building information modeling. But the opportunity to build something new is how you leverage machine learning and how that sort of integrates with it. And so I think the shorthand we've been using, which I don't think makes any sense to customers, makes a lot of sense to investors, is to think about Figma
Hmm.
and Cursor, which is used in software development, but doing it for building design. And so we're trying to take ideas and concepts now in terms of how people collaborate, in terms of how buildings are, or how artificial intelligence is integrated and applying it to the challenge of building design. So.
Got it. So in this instance, would your end users slash customers be all the folks in the value chain, A, E, C, and O, or are you starting more on the A and E side?
We are starting more on the A&E side. Over time, you want to serve a much broader audience because the entire, anybody involved in building design, which tends to be a very large group of people, you never think of like, for example, interior designers. Like interior designers, that's actually a good example of like people who do office interiors also design, but they are not building information modeling people. Like they're almost excluded from the process today because the tools are too hard. Like the current building information modeling system is extremely difficult for a casual person to use. Over time, we want our solution to be broadly accessible for all the people who are involved in design, but we're definitely starting with the architecture group.
Super, super. And in terms of, again, we come back to this adoption cycles, right? This is a bit of a vague question. Do you think that building an AI-centric product is actually helping in sort of articulating the value prop a little better and driving adoption, or is it sort of immaterial or it's sort of
In
insignificant?
part. So, the one thing I've learned over all those years is you know, all technologies go through that hype cycle where there's like for a couple of years, you remember cloud when it first came out. For like 4 years, all you had to say was we are a cloud-centric fill in the blank CRM ERP system and you got attention. Nowadays, nobody cares. They just assume, like if you are building a piece of software, you don't say we're a cloud-centric CRM system. You say we are a CRM system because people just assume that you've done a good job of how you deploy, how you integrate, how people access your tool. You don't make a big deal about the underlying technology. So in the early days, it helps to say you're AI centric because in the customer base, there's this desire and budget to say, hey, man, let's look at this new cycle of stuff
Hmm.
and let's allocate time and people. Over time, it's meaningless. Over time, I think AI is just a technology you have to learn to embed, leverage, integrate in a way that's completely transparent to the user. And I think that's in the long range, I don't think if you talk to me 7 years from now, I don't think we'll be standing up and down saying we are AI enabled, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, yeah, we need to let people know we're a modern system, and part of being a modern system is integrating AI really well. So,
Got it. Super. And like I mentioned earlier, right, a part of the endeavor is trying to get to signal from noise here, given that there's
yes.
so much noise in the
Oh,
ecosystem
yeah.
around AI, right? Yeah. So help us understand sort of when your customers use Motif, what's the before and after? What are they experiencing? What is the value that they're getting?
I mean, we are 2.5 years into our journey, Archit, so we have so much left to do. So our answer will change every year. So today, I would say what we are able to do for them is really just improve communication and collaboration, right? So the level of maturity of our solution today is we walk into a customer, they're working with 10, 15 consultants, they're trying to share a 3D design or a set of drawings with people, and they're not able to do that in a very easy way. After they use us, it's very simple and smooth for them to take, here is the building, here is the entryway, here is the third floor here. Like it becomes much more straightforward for them to sort of enable communication and sharing on the design side and really mask all the 2D, 3D, all the complexity just goes away because it becomes as easy to share a piece of the building as a YouTube video is. Like that's sort of like, I know that sounds like it's the way things should work, but it is not the way like just take a 3D BIM model and say, I want to isolate and share, just the kitchen wing of the new hospital. It's impossible to do it in the current stack. And we make that really much more possible for people to do it in a smooth way. So today our value proposition is that you talk to me 12 months from now, we'll be doing much more for our customers. So,
That's the joy of building something, I guess. Everything keeps
exactly.
evolving. Super.
Yeah.
Um, so Amar, let's pivot a little to the I guess the a little bit on pricing. Then I want to talk a little bit about talent.
Yeah.
Pricing models in this space, do you see them as being sort of replicating kind of the SaaS models or newer models that are coming into play? How do you think
It's
about
a
that?
little combination. Like I think the emerging AI, where you add AI services, the emerging business model for that is consumption, which is like you token based, because these are all compute intensive things, and so you kind of have to go on that basis. So I do think the world is moving to more of a hybrid model. And the one I am excited about, which is it's really all usage based in the sense that even the named user model needs to migrate towards a more of like we will not just charge you if for a like a named user. It's like how many people are actually using the system. There's like base it more on like what I think is concurrency, which is you as a company should be able to have 100 named users in our system, but if only 10 of them are using the system at a time, we should charge you for 10. You know what I mean? It's like it's also so even the named user model I think is heading to a usage-based system for a fair exchange with customers.
That kind of makes sense. It's ultimately pay as you go because the consumption is what drives the economics of the business at the end of the day. It's
Exactly.
roughly a way to look at it, right? Great.
Exactly.
Again, speaking of noise, there's so much noise, Amar, around talent in this space, right? We hear about
Hmm.
quote unquote talent wars and people being
Yeah,
whisked
yeah,
away for millions of dollars. So
yeah.
what's your take on talent in this space, the quality, the volume, where it's at, where it's going?
I mean, this is not a great analogy, Archit. I would say it's a little bit like the IPL. So, if you like the IPL, look, there are people who are absolute superstars. Like they are worth every last dollar. And if you think about machine learning, there are a few people who come out of labs and researchers who are just outstanding. They're just worth every dollar and they'll make a difference. And this is where, Meta and all these guys are fighting for these people. But just like that's probably you need one of those people or two of those people. Like no, I think you don't stack 40 of those people in a company. But I think some of the talent stuff is getting a little overhyped in some ways. So I do think that the vast majority of what the work that needs to back to the previous question you're asking is the way to leverage AI is to actually find useful problems to solve for customers. Too much of what has happening with AI ML has been like flashy demos, like these are very thin layers of things that are built upon foundation models.
Mhm.
And just, if you start thinking about solving problems, you need good full stack engineers, almost much more than you need these like domain experts on machine learning algorithms. Like, so guys like us who are building vertical software are somewhat reliant on the foundation model guys to do the heavy lifting and then adding business logic on top of it to make it work. So I think you can be smart about just like constructing an IPL team. Like how many Virat Kohlis do you need versus, the broader
Yeah.
group of just really strong, good, solid engineers.
And to
So
channel one of my favorite movies, Moneyball, maybe there's a, how do you get what is
exactly.
their on-base percentage equivalent, right? That's how you
Exactly.
build a portfolio. Super. Just a couple of last questions before we wind up.
Sure.
I know we're short on time here. What would be your advice to folks building something in this space today?
In AEC.
Yeah, AEC, startups.
It's there's still a target-rich environment. I think it's a great time to go after the AEC industry. There's still many unsolved problems. You regularly hear this from customers. I really do think that you start with problem first and technology second. A lot of the people I run into start with technology first and go to the problem second. And that, it doesn't like ultimately the way you create value and have customers in the long run is you build something that is delivering enduring value to people. And I think that's kind of my standard advice is spend the time, listen to people, really understand what needs to get solved for a customer, figure out some kind of unique point of view that is different than what exists. Why can you be different than and I always say ideas are not unique, execution is. So ultimately, when you land on something that you think, okay, this is what I'm going to go after, really focus on building a team that learns how to execute well. So
Super. Amar, I think that's a great note to sort of wind this up. Again, thanks so much for taking the time. Loved hearing your perspectives and insights.
thank you.
I mean, maybe we do a follow up at some point in time about my other love, which
Understood.
is manufacturing, which again,
Okay,
you've been around that
happy
space
to.
as well. So I'm sure there's some similar and comparable fun stories there. Anyway, thanks so much for taking the time and,
My pleasure.
look forward to keeping in touch. Cheers.
Sounds good. Be well, Archit.
Thanks.
Talk
Bye.
soon.